Back in 2016, we made a video about our gaming setup and home studios to show off how the different aspects come together and help us make the videos that you've seen on this channel. It's been a few years now, and we constantly get questions and comments about when we might do another tour. So, yeah, it's about darn time, right? It's actually kind of embarrassing at this point. But you know, thinking back on how much our setups have changed, even in just the last year alone, we thought it was probably for the best for us to just do separate videos this time around. So, here we go. Here's a look at my gaming setup and studio space as of right now in 2024. Try and I launched My Life in Gaming on YouTube on October 1st, 2013. It's funny to think back on how things have changed since that first video, How to Beat DuckTales Remastered. We spent a year researching how to get pristine-looking video from game systems, and our first video was intentionally run through a VCR onto tape to make it look as grungy as possible. This is even funnier when you think about the kind of videos that we're known for these days.
At the push of a button on your telephone, our game masters are standing by to teach you all the best strategies you need to win.
I worked out of an apartment in Williamsburg, Brooklyn for about 5 months before my wife, my 1-year-old daughter, and I packed up and moved out to the Midwest. The final episode of My Life in Gaming I built in that apartment was the original Phantasy Star video, which was in production concurrently with the Klonoa Door to Phantom Isle episode. Although I don't really have any real video evidence of my gaming setup in that apartment, I can tell you that it wasn't of much note at all. In fact, I don't even think I could truly consider it a gaming setup at all. I just had a couple of systems crammed into an entertainment center, while most of my older consoles were in a storage bin at the back of my closet. Thinking back on it, now, I wonder how things would have been different if Mister was even a thing. Still, I do have a pretty good look at my setup in the rental house we moved into just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio in February 2014 thanks to RGB 102 and our RGB Masterclass series. It's not branded as a setup tour, but it basically was. If you've seen it, you'll recall that I had most of my game systems sitting on a wire shelf that I got from Target. But I could only have one sending a video to my TV and capture card at a time. It wasn't too involved because I didn't even know how long I'd even be there. Turns out, it wouldn't even be all that long, and the final episode I made in that house was the Space Harrier series video. After 9 months and a second child on the way, we moved into a house in the next town over. The attic, which was converted into a pretty nice apartment by the previous owners, was where I'd make my parts of the show for the next 5 years. It was cool to finally have a home that was our own, and I could really dig in and have some fun customizing the space. Except that house was nearly 140 years old. It was sweltering hot up there in the summer and absolutely ice cold in the winter. Still, I managed to transform the attic into a pretty sweet setup, which you all saw in the 2016 video. I did do a more off-the-cuff, behind-the-scenes video update in 2019 though. A lot has changed, I guess, since 2016. As my kids got older, we began looking for a house that wouldn't require quite as much work, and eventually found one at the right price that had everything we were looking for. Not to mention, a finished basement that had a ton of potential.
Well, so I guess this is it. This is the final stream from that house.
Yep.
Wow, yeah, it's after midnight.
It is. As we closed out the Turok Dinosaur Hunter comparison stream at the tail end of December 2019, I began to tear down the setup that I'd spent so long establishing. I'd like to say that I was sad, but honestly, I was ready to move on. empty canvas of a basement has become this. I knew going in that I wanted to make this a central space where I could enjoy almost all of my hobbies, interests, and profession. Sit back, play some games, or watch a movie. Maybe tinker around with this and that. But I also wanted this to be utilitarian for capturing game footage, shooting B-roll of different devices, and editing video on my PC. I had some ideas of how I was going to make this happen, but when everything shut down in March of 2020 because of COVID-19, well, let's just say that I had a lot more time to work on this space. I don't think this whole setup would have been nearly as elaborate if that hadn't happened. I not only ended up with something that blows all of my expectations away, but I also learned a whole slew of new skills while I worked on it. Stuff I'd never expected to learn, such as running additional electrical lines for outlets. Let's get started with the overall layout. This is one big room, so it might look bigger than the old space, but it's actually not. It's around the same square footage, but a lack of walls dividing it up, and it'll play tricks on you. So the gaming setup is along the wall here, complete with an LG OLED C8 as the main TV, and a couple of PVMs on the sides. The consoles, more than 30 of them, are all hooked up on these shelves here. Along the opposite wall is my game collection, or game library as I like to call it. Things were in alphabetical order at one point, but I've moved stuff around enough that things have gotten pretty chaotic. I apologize to everyone who might feel OCD looking at this, but I promise I will eventually get it sorted one day. Along the shorter wall at the end is my PC setup, where I do just about everything else. Capture gameplay, live stream, edit, or just work. And all the way down at the other end is the B-roll set. This table is where I shoot a lot of the product footage that has become increasingly more prominent in our videos over the years. Okay, so there is a lot going on here. Probably too much, honestly. It's densely packed, but I think that it has a pretty nice and cozy feel to it. So I originally thought I was going to do this video in a way that separated everything out and went through each aspect one by one, like I did in the 2016 video. But the more I tried to box it up like that, the more I realized that each part, the gaming setup, computer setup, and video setup, are all linked in various ways that it would be nearly impossible to compartmentalize aspects in a clear way. This challenge has been further compounded by the fact that it's sort of like the oldest house around here. I'm constantly moving things around, trying to expand, reduce, or simply optimize the entire setup. So what I'm really trying to say is, don't be surprised if certain things might shift, relocate, or disappear from shot to shot throughout this video. That said, I'm just going to do my best to try to explain what's going on, how it works, and talk about a variety of aspects that I'm hoping you'll find as interesting. All right, let's go. Let's start with the aesthetics. I went heavy on a black, white, and gray color scheme, which looks clean and hides the dust. But I ain't gonna lie, it can look pretty boring on video, which is why I've made more regular use of colored lighting when I think it adds to a shot composition. Whether it be B-roll or my on-camera hosting clips, I think it goes a long way in making some things more dynamic. But I will admit that I miss the warmer feel of similar shots in the old house. Oh, and about that dust, shine a bright light around here and, well, the truth will be revealed, and it ain't pretty. Being in a basement, there's always a concern about moisture, and to combat this, I set up a couple of dehumidifiers that are on smart outlets that run a few nights a week while I sleep. But naturally, moving my setup from the attic to a basement, there's always a threat of flooding in the back of my mind. I guess the previous owners experienced a little bit of flooding and went completely overboard on making sure that it doesn't happen ever again with waterproofing from EverDry. This was a huge bonus for me when we bought the house. And it even came with a super beefy sump pump with a battery that'll last a week or 2 weeks without power. Still, I try to make an effort to keep my equipment elevated off the floor when I can. We've had some heavy rain here and there on occasion, and I haven't run into any issues yet. So I do have confidence in the work that's been done. The only annoyance is that the sump pump might run for about 2 seconds every hour, which is not a big deal, but I still built this janky looking soundproof box to cover it up. From the floor to up above, one of my favorite features of this space isn't completely obvious at a glance. A drop ceiling. This is honestly something I'd never even thought to do if it wasn't here when we moved in. I've taken full advantage of this boon by having cables run behind the wall, up above the drop ceiling, and back down to their destination. This secondary ceiling gives me about a foot and a half between it and the real ceiling, which is perfect for long cable runs or Wi-Fi access points or even surge protectors, while also making them completely and easily still accessible. I love it. Ceiling tiles like this can actually be pretty messy, leaving a white dust on stuff when you move them around in and out of their slots. So over time, I've begun replacing the old messy tiles with new sound absorption tiles from Soundsolate. I really wanted matte black tiles over the TV, but I thought an all black ceiling down here might be kind of depressing. So right now, the ceiling is 3 different colors, which, to be honest, doesn't really bother me. I kind of like it. When we first moved in, the entire basement was lit by these overhead shop lights, which do a fantastic job of making it ultra bright. While I originally planned on just using those, my plans quickly changed course when I discovered a ton of these rails and lamp heads at a clearance section in Home Depot. I bought a bunch, got them home, and started to set them up, and quickly drove back to get the rest once I realized what I could do with them. Over time, I've equipped these lights with smart bulbs, which allow me to automate a lot of my lighting needs. I make heavy use of bias lighting behind my monitors. It's easy on my eyes when looking at different screens throughout the day. I've also installed LED light strips behind my game console shelves and entertainment stands. But those I don't turn on all that often, mainly when I want to accentuate those areas on video. I definitely miss the natural light that the old attic had though. There's just 2 small windows towards the back end by the B-roll set, which I suppose is an overall good thing because it gives me a more reliable environment to shoot video in, but it can be particularly depressing and isolating at times, especially during the winter months. A couple of years back, Game Dave did a video on wall control metal pegboards. Thanks to that video, I ended up grabbing a few of them and using them for a variety of purposes. I'm particularly proud of how the controller setup looks. I've run a magnetic USB cable back here so that I can charge these controllers at will. The other wall control pegboards are used for shelving, hooks, and buckets to mount portable systems, games that I'm currently playing, or just to hold some often used accessories like controller adapters, the Time Sleuth, headphones, video cables, my VR headsets, and other random knickknacks. The framed artwork that I have on the walls is a mix of music, movies, and games, and tech. Hey, check out this Cardinov arcade marquee. One thing that I'm particularly proud of is this frame on hinges that conceals the breaker panel, which makes it easy to access whenever I need to. Seating-wise, I decided to go with a couple of recliners instead of a couch because it seemed like it made more sense since I lacked the depth that I had before. That old lazy boy recliner that used to be my computer chair is now my main gaming chair. I love this thing. I've experimented with other chairs, but nothing can compare. So I put the ottoman that stores my controllers and other accessories in between the recliners. But I also use some footrests for additional storage for controllers that I don't want to dig out and other stuff. I absolutely got the idea of storing controllers in Ziploc bags from Try's 2016 setup tour. The ottoman has flip-top cushions so I can use it as a table for beverages and remotes. I'm using a real desk chair at my computer this time, a steel case gesture that I got for a decent deal off of Facebook Marketplace. Yeah, I only became aware of this chair thanks to Tim Rogers' mini review of it in his Cyberpunk video. And I like it. although I'm still not sure if I love it. I probably made a mistake not holding out for a version with a headrest. Back when we first started the channel, when I was in that Brooklyn apartment, if you'd have told me what my video game setup would look like 10 years later, there is no way that I could have imagined the reality of it. The things that I've learned while working on this channel has obviously had an impact on my video game setup. I'm not even sure if there's a method to the madness at this point, because I've only been able to achieve this through years of inspired tinkering. If you really think that there's any way I could have come up with this from the start, then you are giving me way too much credit. It just grew to this point by one harebrained idea at a time. My main TV is a 4K LG OLED C8. Sure, it's several years old at this point and predates HDMI 2.1, which means that I miss out on some of the enhancements that the newer tech allows for, but I'm not all that bothered by it at this point. I know that upgrading to the newer standard would cost a decent amount of money, but more importantly, everything just works in my current setup. Having the latest and greatest doesn't feel worth the laundry list of annoyances that would surely crop up functionality-wise, at least for now. The media stand below the TV are 3 IKEA Besta units up against each other, which contain a ton of equipment. Along the top are a couple of PVMs and a Denon X3400H AV receiver. That AV receiver is a super important piece. Actually, it might be the most important piece of how everything is connected, because it functions as a HDMI selector and splitter. Contained within are various upscalers from the OSSC Pro and Morph to the RetroTink 4K, a HASS Supergun for my arcade PCBs, USB power hubs, AV switchers and splitters, and plenty of modern and obsolete audio and video decks. Hey, you just never know when you might need this stuff, right? Controllers on charging docks litter the far end, with even more AV switchers and splitters below. The different Extron crosspoints, G-SCARTs, G-Comps, and HDMI selectors keep the chaos organized and efficient. And then we have the consoles. When I moved, I decided that I was ready to retire the wire racks that were so prominent in my previous setups. They worked really well and fit my needs exactly for a long time, but here, I wanted something that looked more permanent and finished. What I ended up doing was installing these wall-mounted adjustable shelves. Using a combination of different shelf lengths and depths, I've created a layered setup that, I think looks pretty slick. Oh, and don't worry, the rails, they're bolted into studs, 5 points per rail, so I feel pretty confident about their ability to hold the weight. But figuring out all this stuff wasn't easy. The shelves that I initially picked out were too shallow for certain consoles, specifically the PlayStation 4 Pro. But thinking back on it now, that giant PlayStation 5 would eventually cause problems too. What I ended up having to do is building custom shelves that were deep enough by bolting together some add-on shelves for a wardrobe sold by IKEA. Except the length of the combined shelves were a touch longer than the space that I'd planned for. So I worked around this by turning the last section sideways, creating a L shape to the whole thing. Turns out this works really well for awkwardly shaped systems, like the Super Graphics. And it also gives me enough additional space to fit about one more system per layer. In all, I have about 30 unique consoles hooked up here, but each is connected with the optimal video cable, meaning RGB, component, and HDMI, or sometimes both. As you'd assume, a bunch of my systems are modified in one way or another, whether it be video mods, sound expansions, or optical disc emulators. But I generally try to keep my childhood systems in original condition, like my Tower of Power here. It had a capacitor replacement a couple of years back, but other than that, it's pretty much the same condition as when I got it back in 1989. The two topmost shelves are currently occupied by duplicate systems that I might find to be useful, such as stock systems that I have ODEs in. You never know when you might need to run, say, a GameCube disc, and the way the whole setup is laid out, it's super easy for me to swap out variants. This shorter shelf here has a few duplicate systems hooked up, usually via HD Retrovision cables. And finally, an array of FPGA and emulation consoles, like the analog consoles, a Mister with an analog I/O board, an old Raspberry Pi, and the Evercade VS line the bottom shelf. There's honestly little rhyme or reason to how the systems are organized here, and it really just came down to the length of cables I had on hand. I did try to keep systems that have wired-only controllers closer to the ground, but that's become less of a necessity thanks to wireless solutions for just about every console from 8BitDo, Crix, Brook, and Blue Retro. I mean, it looks pretty clean though, doesn't it? Running video and power cables from these consoles was not only going to be a logistical nightmare no matter what I did, but it also had the potential to look real ugly. The key to making it semi-presentable and manageable are by using network cable raceways vertically between the shelf rails to guard the wires as they go down to their destination. The analog consoles in my setup all run into Super G's G-SCART and G-Comp automatic switches. These have been extremely important to the functionality of my setup, and I honestly don't know what I would have done without them. I have so many things connected at this point that I need 2 of each. These send signals to a variety of upscalers and an Extron, which then uses its multitude of outputs to feed into other upscalers, and a second Extron that is dedicated to feeding the abundance of CRT monitors around here. HDMI switchers handle the relevant systems. I used to have a bunch of different HDMI switchers, but I shelled out for these TestSmart 8 and 16-put input switchers to simplify things, although I still have to use several 5-to-1 switchers from EasyQ and Sagaire here and there. So that Denon X3400H AVR. It's essentially the grand central station of my entire setup. All of the different switchers and scalers and devices and everything all meet here and then are guided to their destinations. A variety of displays, speakers, and capture devices strewn across the basement. The Denon AVR has 3 video outputs. Output 1 and monitor 2 will send the same signal, while zone 2 is a separate output. Unfortunately, the monitor 2 output on my receiver has stopped working, so now I'm sending output 1 to a 4-way splitter, one which goes to the OLED, another goes to the B-roll set, and the last 2 go into those fancy 4K upscalers. Although this is a totally fine workaround, I'm probably going to have to buy a new receiver at some point down the road. The Zone 2 HDMI output, which can send a dedicated second signal to another source, is mainly for capture purposes. That feeds into a splitter, one of which goes into my PC's capture card, an AverMedia 4K Gamer Pro, and the other goes to an Atomos Ninja, a standalone external capture device that has become my daily driver for gameplay recording. It can record up to 4K 60 in a number of different codecs, but it is more finicky than a capture card since it has to adhere to stricter standards. It's a professional device after all. There are ways around that though. I enjoy how reliable and consistent it is, not to have to use a computer for basic gameplay recording. The pass-through on the AverMedia card feeds into the Samsung TV over at my PC setup so I can play games over there as I capture, or more importantly, live stream. You're starting to see how the line between each part of the setup is starting to blur and how it all works together. Obviously, the Denon AVR also handles my surround sound setup. For now, I've opted for just a 5.1 surround system. You may have noticed already, but I installed in-wall speakers. They were definitely a pain in the butt to install, but I think the end result is very much worth it. Oh, and check it out. Because of the drop ceiling, I was able to install rear speakers overhead. I had to get some protective covers and put some insulation around them, but it really goes a long way to making the entire surround setup super clean and seamless.
The dark presence.
The subwoofer is hidden in the corner, blocking my surge protectors from view, but I've also added in some UPS backup power units for the most important electronics. So far, these have been pretty great. My retro consoles are being powered by PS2 Slim adapters. That's a whole other thing and I'm not going to get into it here. I did a video on it a while back that explains the whole thing, so check that out for a detailed explanation of how I'm making this work. One aspect that I've made surprisingly heavy use of are USB charging hubs. More and more devices are powered via USB plugs, and I cannot understate just how much these things can cut down on clutter. But that's not to say my cable organization is immaculate. At one point, maybe it wasn't half bad. But look, when you're constantly tweaking aspects in a setup like this, it's eventually going to get messy, and you just got to come to terms with it. I did, so now I just work out ways to keep it mostly hidden from sight. I mentioned earlier that one of the HDMIs from the 4-way splitter that is sent to my TV and stuff is also sent over to the B-roll set. Well, that line is split during its run to feed the BenQ 4K projector that I did a video on last year. And check it out, I grabbed this pull-down screen for $5 from a yard sale last year, and you know, it's a pretty neat little setup over here. I mainly use it to watch movies, but I do occasionally play games. The only real downside is that wireless controllers fall in and out of sync due to the distance pretty easily. I wish there was a way to extend the range for those. But I do have a couple of duplicate systems over here and a mister so that I can play games that way without having to worry about the distance. Okay, now that you have a pretty good idea about how the gaming setup works, let's check out my computer setup, where I do most of my work: video editing, podcasting, and live streaming. I'm still using the same IKEA desk/table that I've had since 2014 because it's extremely spacious and sturdy, but yeah, I'll readily admit that this looks absolutely ridiculous with the different screens here. I use a curved LG 34-inch ultra-wide 1440p monitor as my main screen, which I find to be pretty useful when it comes to editing video. To the right, I have a 27 LG 4K monitor in a vertical position, and on the left is a Sony 14L5 PVM, a 32-inch Samsung 4K UHD TV, and another 27-inch LG 4K monitor. You might have noticed some shots earlier in the video where there was a larger PVM at the bottom of this stack. I originally had my Sony 20L5 here, but it would sometimes take upwards of 5 minutes to get warmed up enough to see a picture on it. So, I don't know, I thought it was probably a good idea to put it in storage until I could get it looked at. Over time, I've come to really like the setup with the smaller PVM though. So I might put the 20L5 over in the main setup whenever it gets tuned up. The other thing you might notice is how all these monitors are mounted up via adjustable poles and arms. Caleb Pike over on the YouTube channel DSLR Video Shooter has several videos about unique uses for these types of arms. I just went overboard with them. Not only for their intended use, but also modifying them so I could put video lights, microphones, and cameras on them. The poles themselves are braced against the shelf that I put over my monitor. The Samsung UHD TV is the smallest possible 4K TV that I could find that had the features I was looking for. Since I wanted to be able to play games over here without any compromise, I needed all the monitors connected to my AVR to have similar abilities. If one monitor connected wasn't capable of HDR, then it turns it off on all of them. Unless, I guess, I unplug it every time, which would be super annoying. So while I do play games on it if I'm capturing gameplay or live streaming, I mainly use it as a PC monitor, and it makes for an amazing viewing monitor for my editing timeline playback. Actually, the HDMI output feeding this monitor is split, so I can put videos that I'm playing back on my OLED or over at the B-roll set. If there's gameplay on the TV behind me during an on-camera shot, that's usually how I achieve it. Another benefit of the monitors being mounted on adjustable arms is that I can convert the whole thing into a standing desk using a laptop riser for my trackball mouse and keyboard. I've gotten into doing this a lot more over time because of not only the health benefits, but I discovered that I have a much easier time focusing on my work this way. Standing desk mode was also the reason I ended up incorporating a second 27-inch 4K LG monitor. This down here is my main PC. Now, I recently built a new system after using my last one since 2018. I was originally thinking about getting a Mac Studio, but I realized that the M4 chip versions were likely still a good year or so off. So now I just figured it was a good time to go ahead and build a new Windows PC. Inside this chalk-colored Fractal North case is an AMD Ryzen 7950X with 96 gigs of RAM and a NVIDIA RTX 3070 Ti. I don't do much PC gaming myself, and the little that I do is mostly via the Steam Deck these days, so this system was built with video editing and production in mind. So just because I built a new PC doesn't mean that my old one is out of commish. I moved that to the other end of the basement, adjacent to the B-roll set, and set it up as my daily driver for my day job video editing. It's no slouch, even 6 years later. An AMD Threadripper 950X with, again, 96 gigs of RAM and an NVIDIA GTX 1080 Ti. I think that the first generation of Threadripper was maybe not the best suited for video work. 1080p was fine, but 4K, that was a real test of my patience. It seems to be better on the new computer, but it's not as big of a jump as I was hoping for. I sometimes wonder if the RTX 370 Ti is busted in some way or another. On the other hand, it could have a lot to do with Adobe Premiere. Okay, so some other odds and ends on my desk include a pair of Yamaha MSP3A powered monitor speakers. I recently upgraded to these from a pair of PreSonus speakers because these are magnetically shielded, a necessity for their close proximity to my PVM. And yeah, I guess they sound a lot better too, although I mainly still use my Sony MDR V6 monitor headphones for editing. Below my vertical monitor is a Yamaha MG12XU audio mixer. It's mainly used for routing audio for recordings and live streams, but I'll admit that it's probably overkill for what I do. Still, I wanted something with a submix option, and this one just made sense for me. I like to keep this Ambernic RG35XX SP here just in case I need to check something in a game really quick. A lot of these things can be really annoying to set up exactly how you like, but if you have one that supports MuOS, it's definitely the way to go. Maybe when I'm done, I'll write it down in my Gaming Historian Moleskin notebook, right after I place my E-Tank coffee cup on my PS1 jewel case styled coaster. Just kidding, it's full of pens, pencils, and highlighters. This EasyQ selector is for different camera feeds, while my Stream Deck sits here woefully underused. It's mostly a glorified light selector and soundboard. I should really think of some other things to use it for.
That's good!
I have a stack of books up here for reference, including the incredible The Game Console from Evan Amos. The Untold History of Japanese Game Developers is a really special book too. I don't really need these to be right here, but maybe one day I'll be happy that they are. There's another wall control panel mounted over here that's filled with various bric-a-brac, like little figures, photos, crafts, and my Pomodoro method timer. I really love these magnetic arcade marquees that I bought at the Music City Multicon in Nashville in 2023. On the other end of my computer table is a space that has changed many times over the years. Sometimes I have an additional PVM here, sometimes it's just equipment, but right now it's the 4.3 Dell 2007 FPB monitor, which is perfect for the Mister. It even rotates on its stand into tape mode. This was sent to me by a friend of the show, who rescued it from being e-waste. Oh right, the NAS. Try and I use network-attached storage to collaborate since we live around 8 hours apart. This houses all sorts of resources, B-roll, G-roll, which is our term for gameplay footage, graphical effects, and archival material. I did a whole video on this portion of the setup earlier in 2024, so if you want the details on the Synology NAS units we use and how they work for us, check that out. It's still sitting back by the B-roll set where my old PC is. I'd say that the only thing that's changed since doing that first video is that I've upgraded portions of my network setup at home that lets me connect to the NAS through a 10 gigabit connection. So now I can actually work directly off those drives if I wanna, which is super, super helpful. All right, now that you know what I'm working with here, let's talk production gear. Since the last tour video, I've developed more of an interest in the technical side of production thanks to YouTubers like DSLR Video Shooter and Gerald undone. And so I like to streamline and splurge on new gear, whether or not I have a pressing need for it. It's kind of a problem. In the 2016 video, I was using my Canon 60D DSLR camera to shoot my portions of the show, while Tri had upgraded to a Panasonic GH4, which could shoot 4K video. When the Panasonic GH5 released in 2017, I knew I had to get on his level, so I upgraded. And it was so worth it. There were huge benefits to that camera. Naturally, being able to film up to 4K 60 was the real selling point, especially when most of our episodes were releasing at 1080p. Having that extra resolution lets you zoom in significantly on a 1080p timeline without losing any detail. And that allows you to make your own camera movements in the edit. It was a complete game changer in many ways. The other super important feature is Synchro Scan, aka how we shoot footage off a CRT without or having a very minimal refresh line visible. Turning this feature on lets you adjust the shutter speed of the camera by the decimal point. For instance, the NES and SNES run at 60.1 Hz. If I point a camera at the screen using a standard shutter speed of 60, you'll see the refresh line every few seconds. Turning on SynchroScan and dialing it into 60.1 to match the speed of the system, and look at that, it's all gone and you get a rock solid picture. Seriously, SynchroScan is incredibly important to the overall look of the show, and I don't know what I'd do without it. After 5 years, in 2022, Panasonic released the GH6. Based on our experience with the 4 and 5, it seemed like a natural upgrade for us to have matching cameras. The GH6 was even able to shoot up to a 5.8K resolution by utilizing the full sensor, giving us a similar benefit at 2160p to using 4K footage on a 1080p timeline. Except, SynchroScan seems to be glitched and doesn't work with the full range of variables, specifically skipping 60.1 and 60.2. Not a big deal for literally anyone else, but if you want to shoot NES or Super NES off screen, yeah. Needless to say, I've tried to get Panasonic's attention in the hope that they'd fix it, but to date, absolutely no luck with this. While the GH6 has been my daily driver for a while now, I'll still break out the GH5 if I need to film specific systems off a CRT. The rest of the time, the old GH5 workhorse serves as my main webcam, feeding into an EVGA XR1 Pro external capture device via HDMI. I bought a cheaper mechanical lens so that I don't have to worry about settings changing when I turn it on and off. Speaking of lenses, my most heavily used one is the 12 to 35mm, but I have a few others on hand that have specific use cases, such as a macro lens and a 25mm prime lens. When I moved, I wanted a spot where I could shoot product B-roll that was always ready to go. B-roll is the cutaway shots that provide context for things we're discussing in an episode. Mostly, they're close-ups of products or certain aspects of an object that we want to draw attention to. We focus on this because showing something existing in the real world and us interacting with it gives the show a more tactile feel. Do you remember how Tri had a wood grain backdrop mounted on his wall, along with a rustic-looking desk to set things on? I did something similar in the attic kitchen of my old house, but when I moved, I didn't want to do anything quite as permanent. Instead, I had the idea to build a filming set. You see, I built this backdrop using PVC, which I then mounted the wood grain panels on. Although I sort of wish I'd made it a bit wider, I'm extremely happy with this thing. I have it angled in the back corner where it hides the sump pump, so it's pretty useful in that regard too. I previously used a desk as a surface to put objects that I was shooting on. I liked the cherry color of it, but it honestly didn't have much texture to it. One day, I was visiting a local open box store and I saw this table on clearance. It's huge, flawed, and tall. Pretty much exactly what I was looking for. Later, I bought this refurbished 40-inch 4K TV to use as a backdrop to show gameplay if needed, or in some cases, create fake backgrounds. As I've mentioned, this TV is hooked up to my AVR, but since I recently connected my old PC over here, I can run video files from my NAS directly on the TV. This can also serve as a handy viewing monitor for my camera feed if it's not going to be in the shot and I need to get a big, good look at what I'm filming. Over here's this 14-inch PVM, which is routed from the Extron in my main setup, and I use it for CRT shots. I like to keep this PVM over here specifically because it has an anti-glare filter on the screen, which helps with all the surrounding lights. I moved the old B-roll table, the cherry oak colored desk that I've had since I was a teenager, to the side, and I have a 27-inch Toshiba consumer CRT on it. Below the desk is a huge metal filing cabinet that I got for cheap from Goodwill. Inside it is literally hundreds of old and new video game magazines. And then we have this, a Rhino slider with an Arc 2. If I had to pick one thing that has informed our overall production workflow over the years, it would be, without a doubt, this thing. The Rhino Arc 2 is a programmable, motorized, and automated slider system that is responsible for some of the best shots we've ever concocted for our show. Some might say that we overused the crap out of it, and you're probably right. But the dynamic shots we can achieve with it certainly do more for our production quality than just about anything else. Whether it be achieving smooth pans and tilts, sweeping shots over piles of games and hardware, or even just slow dolly in shots, this thing has delivered the goods. It is expensive, but we backed it on Kickstarter for a significant discount, so that helps justify it. But these days, you know what, I'm not even sure if Rhino exists as a company anymore. So if this thing ever dies, chances are we're going to be switching over to an Edelkrone rig. Up here is this overhead mount. Now, I'm pretty proud of this thing, and I should probably make heavier use of this, but what I did was take one of the extra monitor pole mounts that I had lying around after modifying the arm portions and bolted it to the floor joists above, attached some arms to it, and put an adjustable camera ball head on it, and voila, a super useful overhead mount for your camera. Hook it into the HDMI cable that I have dangling here, and you can see it on the big screen. Now, I've gone severely overboard with video lights down here. I originally started out using these smart bulbs that I had mentioned way earlier in the video, but they run at 50 Hertz, and I could see a slight flicker in the video when I was using them. So over the last several years, I've slowly moved into the Aperture Amaran ecosystem. An Aperture P60C, which allows for RGB coloring, a P60X, which only supports color temperature levels, and this P150C with a light dome softbox surround the B-roll table. This little Amaran MC RGB light is for an extra dose of color to accent each shot. Using Aperture's Sidus Link app, I'm able to manipulate color and brightness on the fly, which is extremely useful. Another area where this drop ceiling has come in clutch is using some scissor mounts, and I can hang the lights from above. Once again, saving space where I can. The drop ceiling might be the MVP down here. So audio has always been and continues to be a challenging aspect for me, both in recording it and editing it to sound as good as it can. What sounds good to me one day sounds completely wrong the next. In 2016, I was using a Zoom H4n to record my voiceover and on-camera parts. I upgraded that Zoom to a Zoom H6 because of the interchangeable microphone capsules. I purchased a separate shotgun capsule that was super useful, but eventually I got really annoyed how the overall sound of my voice would change depending on my proximity to the mic. After doing some research on how to avoid this, I decided to buckle down and just get a dedicated microphone for VO. I settled on the Electro Voice RE20, a well-loved microphone that has been heavily used in radio for years. The big thing that sold me on it is the variable D design, which means it's not affected by proximity like other mics are. I put it on a Rode TSA-1 mic arm that's clamped to the shelf above my PC, and I could quickly pull the whole thing down for some quick VO sessions. For a while there, I was recording my VO directly to my editing timeline in Adobe Premiere. Something that I thought would be useful slowly began to annoy me as I started making ridiculous tweaks to line readings and changing aspects of a script so much more because I could just do it quickly. For all the streamlining I was trying to implement, things started taking longer. Much like capturing game footage, I wanted to once again untether my audio recording from the PC as much as possible. I started passing through the microphone inputs on my mixer into my Zoom H6 so I could record VO directly to that. Still, the sound difference between my VO and on-camera parts really irked me, but I let it slide. Shooting on camera stuff has always been a challenge. You'll notice that we don't use the green screen anymore in our show, but sometimes it's hard to get a good background shot. For a while there, I was filming stuff over at my PC using the camera mounts that I'd set up, but a couple of months ago, I saw a video by Tom Buck on YouTube where he showed off a portable, movable production rig that he'd built using a variety of equipment. And everything changed. Using pieces and parts I had on hand with a small rig tripod that I found at a garage sale, I built this self-contained camera rig. I added a set of tripod wheels to it, and now I can just roll it around, lock my camera in with a quick release plate, slap my Parrot teleprompter onto the lens, move my lights into place, and I'm ready to go. The split beam glass teleprompter I used for years fell and shattered.
Even good guys blow it.
So I switched to the far more compact and light Parrot teleprompter. I liked it so much that I was quick to back the Parrot Pro on Kickstarter. Since we started this channel, I have this condition where I can't stop thinking about ways to optimize and enhance things that are working just fine as it is. This was no different. And the first thing I wanted to add was a proper shotgun mic. I went for a Sennheiser MKE 600 thanks to some unused gift cards I had left over from the holidays. I attached it to this Manfrotto extendable arm so I can get it close to me but out of frame while feeding it into the Zoom H6. I simply love how this mic sounds, so much so that I started using it to record my standalone VO too. I put a swing out arm on my desk where I can read and record my VO segments onto a Zoom F3. I've used both mics throughout this video in different segments. Can you tell which was used where? I could now leave my Zoom H6 permanently on the camera rig, but I wanted an external monitor to be able to see what I was recording. I could use any of the TVs around here, and I did. But this external monitor is small, light, and fits the bill in just the way that I was looking for. See what I mean? My propensity for tweaking doesn't just apply to video games. Somehow, this stuff seems to work as I intend. About 99.9% of the time. I'll totally admit that most of this stuff in my setup doesn't exist because I need it, but as an adult, the process is a big part of the appeal for me. I'm curious if I can just make it work in the first place. But let me tell you, if something starts acting weird or just flat out stops working, it is a total pain to figure out where the problem is. Over time, I figured out ways to deduce where a problem might be stemming from, but it's not always easy. All right, it's finally time to turn our attention to the game library. So I originally planned on doing this way earlier in the video, but I thought that if I did it here at the end, then I could utilize all the different aspects of my setup to really showcase some of my favorites and some of the most sentimental parts of my collection. My philosophy is still pretty consistent to what it was before. I view my game collection as a curated collection since I mainly buy games that I know that I'll like and I have an interest in playing to completion one day. Although I've certainly added a number of games to the collection that I thought might be useful to show in the future. Except for maybe this copy of Coury in the House for the Nintendo DS. But that was a gift. These shelving units are from Atlantic Oscar and hold something like 1,000 or 2,000 CD-sized cases each. They work great, but I don't know if they're gonna last forever. Honestly, they feel like they kind of feel like junk. I do like that they're not all that deep because the width of the basement might become an issue if they were much bigger. However, they are filling up, and one day I might have to do a full rethink of this stuff. I mean, look at the state of my PlayStation 5 games. Maybe I'll consider going with wall control or something similar, but that's way out of my price range for now. In the meantime, one approach that I've taken to save on space might be a bit controversial, combining some games into one case and making a set out of it. I've been buying these 2-disc PS4 and PS5 cases off of eBay, and if there's a game that I have on, say, PS4 and PS5, I'll consolidate them into one case and just double up the inserts like so. I've even been so bold as to combine PS3 and PS4 versions of games when it makes sense. Over the last year or so, I've been weeding out inessential and unnecessary duplicates from my collection. If it's something that I decided needs to go, I have this storage bin that I place it in until I find a new home for it. As you can see, there's plenty of things in there. So I'm lucky that I knew what sort of games that I loved fairly early on. I mowed lawns all summer so I could buy stuff like Chrono Trigger, Popful Mail, and Final Fantasy III on day one. These games ended up having a significant effect on me, so I still have those original copies from my childhood. If anything were to happen to the more expensive games that I've held onto, or I had to let them go for some reason or another, I don't think that I would go out of my way to pay the exorbitant prices that they go for now. That's because the memories are attached to my specific copy of the game. For instance, this is my copy of Phantasy Star. It's the one that I bought with my birthday money in 1988 at KB Toys, right before going to see The Naked Gun at the movie theater in the Chautauqua Mall in Lakewood, New York. That's the kind of stuff that is important to me, and something that another copy of the game could never replace. Although I tend to only buy games that I think I'll like, there's been 2 times where I've actively collected subsets of games. First are the Sega Genesis black grid boxes. The early years of the Sega Genesis is one of my favorite eras in video games, and I enjoyed the evolution from the white grid of the Sega Master System to the more grown-up style of the Genesis. Ghouls and Ghosts might just have my favorite box art of all time, and is my favorite game on the system. I enjoy collecting the black grid boxes so much that I decided to also collect the later releases that have a smaller grid on them. Putting them side by side, notice how the older games have a bigger grid? Why the heck do I have 2 copies of Super Hang-On? Check it out, it got a reprint via McCheskey and has an ESRB rating on it. I never planned on buying this, but when I just saw it in great condition at a store, I couldn't resist. The last black box game that I needed was Chicky Chicky Boys, and I completed this subset back in 2021. Speaking of Genesis box art, I am a sucker for Japanese Mega Drive games, because they always feature some amazing box art. It's crazy how some of these have the tiniest little screenshots on them, and instead rely on the art to sell them. The other thing that I spent a long time collecting were working designs games. I am an unabashed lover of working design style, although I understand that they're not for everyone. Lunar the Silver Star was the first game I ever played where the translation made me feel like the characters were real people. So going forward, I was there on day one for all of their Sega CD releases. These 4 games are my original childhood copies. I never bought a Sega Saturn until it was mostly dead in the US, but I bought many of their PlayStation releases, the Lunars and Arc the Lad collection, obviously. So when I got back in the games pretty heavily around 2009-ish, I decided that I wanted to get all of their games that I didn't already have. Some of them were already plenty expensive by that point, but I'm glad I just did it when I did. I completed that collection in 2019 with Exile Wicked Phenomenon for the Turbo CD. I am not interested in the different variants, although I will admit that I'm often tempted to buy that foil-stamped version of Lunar for the Sega CD because I only have the original version without that print. My love for working designs ensures that I will support any of Victor Ireland's endeavors whenever I know that he's involved, like with this Kickstarter variant of Classic Heroes 2 on the PSP and PS3. And, of course, Summon Night 5 on the PSP and Summon Night 6 on the PS4. I had to get that wonderful edition. And of course, I can't forget Snatcher. While I did originally buy it when it first came out, I sold it for around $80 when I was raising money to move to New York City in 2003. In 2016, with the help of my friend Joey, I was able to re-add it to my collection. Sure, it's not my exact childhood copy, but I'll make an exception for this one.
She has amnesia as well, and without any memories between the two of us, I'm afraid there was very little to base a good relationship on.
I can see your point there.
Over here, we have this collection of games and videos that I've been a part of, whether it be something that I straight up edited content for, authored a Blu-ray disc, or simply have my name in the special thanks. I'll be adding the Atari 50 Expanded Edition and Worms Armageddon Anniversary Edition to this real soon. Oh, over here, here's copy number 1 of the limited How to Beat VHS we did early on in the channel's lifetime. The different versions of Night Trap here are obviously the most prominently featured, and there's a bunch of them. It still amazes me that I had a chance to be a part of this through pure happenstance. Such a weird series of events that it almost felt like winning the lottery. It's made even better by the fact that I legit loved and appreciated the game from its original release. Of course, there's the Battle Garaga box set with the vinyl soundtrack. I've never opened this because I actually have the game digitally, but the M2 Complete Works documentary, which is woefully out of date now, is probably the thing that I'm most proud of doing on the channel. Actually, maybe of everything that I've ever worked on. Back when we first started the channel, Tri and I had the opportunity to edit several segments of RetroWare's The Video Game Years. That's how I met Joe from GameSack. Speaking of which, here's my recently recovered Britney's Dance Beat for the PS2. Along the tops of the shelves, I have many of my limited editions and other collectibles, but honestly, I don't have a lot of love for limited editions or big boxes in general. Because unless it's a series that I really love and the limited edition comes with something to justify the size, I'll only go for the standard edition every time. Same for steelbooks. If given an option, I will never choose a steelbook. I am all about that uniform layout. So what are the small groups of games that I'll make exceptions for? The Ease series is a big one, and I'll be adding the Ease 10 Special Edition in the coming weeks. I was doing Wonder Boy and Wonder Boy adjacent games for a while there, but it's just become too much to keep up with. If Skies of Arcadia ever got a remaster, I'd love a limited edition to go with my Japanese big box. Sometimes games are only offered in big boxes. In those cases, I'll just take the game cases out and throw it up on top. My mini consoles are also up here. Although I have plenty of other options to play literally every single game on these, I was buying them just because I thought they were really neat. After we did a video on the Genesis Mini, Sega even sent me this super limited version of the Sega CD and 32X minis. These are readily available in Japan, but US-styled versions were only sent to certain people. Of course, I can't forget the Tiger Electronics Carnov LCD game. Different trinkets or accessories fill the gaps between shelves, like cartridge adapters, memory cards, cables, and things like amiibos, which I wish I didn't buy so many of. And there's also the random things that I got from my years of working for Electronics Boutique from 1997 to 2002. Like this Chocobo piggy bank. At least, I think that's what it is. There was a time when I was only buying box stuff for portable games, but I've since let that foolish idea go. These 3D printed trays from Blue Shell 3D are a great way to organize loose carts. Speaking of loose games, here's a little tip. Do you have any disc games without a case? Hit up your local library and see if they're selling any of their audio books on CDs. Some of them come in these nice big clamshell cases with double-sided pages. Mine has a lot of games in it, although a nice chunk of these discs are games that were still in systems that I bought from Goodwill. It almost always seems to be sports games. You ever notice that? For everything else, I have ODEs, flashcards, or have hacked the console to allow for games to be installed on a hard drive or solid-state drive. Or I can just play the game on an FPGA or emulation console. For me, the primary use for playing games in this manner comes down to allowing us to get a wide variety of game capture as possible across as many different consoles as we can. Generally, if I'm sitting down to play through a game though, it'll be something that I own in my library. Some might think that that's silly, but I like to think that it pushes me to think more about the game that I'm playing. It's not just a name on a list, it's an experience that I specifically wanted to have. In the early days of the channel, I used to love buying reproduction games, but these days I'll only buy the occasional new retro physical game if it's being released or localized officially for the first time. I really like what Retrobit is doing because their stuff feels very well made. I was eager to add their Mega Man The Wily Wars release to my collection because it was the first time it was officially released in the US outside of the Sega channel. Same with Eliminate Down and Glaylancer. It's super cool that these got an official release after all this time. Homebrew releases can be a bit of a minefield though, so I'm pretty picky when it comes to that. Stuff like Xeno Crisis, Tanglewood, and Pure Solar are easy adds in this category though. Oh, check out Bubbo Escape for the Game Boy from longtime friend and MLiG supporter Gabe Swar. He even signed it. A couple of other autographed games in my collection. I had the devs at M2 sign my copy of Gauntlet on the Genesis and the Sega 3D Classics for the 3DS. Contra 4 is signed by composer Jake Kaufman. Mass Effect 3 on the 360 is signed by some of the devs and voice actors, and Castlevania for the NES is signed by composer Kinuyo Yamashita. Most of my little trinkets, slipcovers, manuals, and random doodads get put into a couple of waterproof boxes in the closet though. The fact is, I just don't have space for all that stuff, so I'd rather just store it away in case I need it for something. I gotta keep that gallium punching puppet out though. For all the stuff that I have in my game library, I am generally unconcerned with monetary worth. I'll let my wife and kids worry about that when I die. 99% of the time, I buy things to play, so I don't ever follow a game's price after I have it. In addition, I also don't keep things sealed. That is, unless I have the game digitally. There's just no reason for it. So did I miss anything? Yeah, probably a whole bunch of stuff. It's hard to whittle down years of changes into an hour or so I figured I'd have a little section here at the end for odds and ends that I may have forgotten about initially, or didn't fit anywhere else, or that were just added during the production of this whole thing. I'm a sucker for angled cables, and these USB extensions are great for cleaning up wiring. I like the HDMI repeaters from Monoprice and Cable Matters to help with the longer cable runs. I bought this rolling height adjustable table on Facebook Marketplace so I could shoot B-roll around the basement with different backgrounds. I've only used it a few times, but I like that I can just roll it under my old PC table and it disappears. I use Adobe Premiere to edit almost everything, but I've been dabbling with DaVinci Resolve a little bit lately. It's a totally new way of thinking about editing and runs contrary to what I've done for 2 decades now. But it just runs so much better. Let's see what 2025 holds for Adobe, but I might just be nearing my jump-off point. It's totally ridiculous, but when I saw that Hasbro was selling a Nerf gun based on the pulse rifle from Aliens, I had to have it. This is the first and last Nerf gun I'll buy for myself because I've wanted something like this since 1986. I keep a rolling bin of controllers, cables, and accessories under the B-roll table. The ones that were junk, I cut the cables short on them so I could just put them in video shots and not struggle with getting the cables out of frame. The table that my old PC is at doubles as a modding station, soldering iron, desoldering gun, and wires. I was being pretty consistent with learning how to solder, but I've fallen out of practice and I just don't have enough time to pick it up again. And finally, I guess I should mention the closet. This is where I store all sorts of stuff from duplicate consoles, TVs, PVMs, bins of wires and power adapters, unused video equipment, books, VHS tapes, lots and lots of VHS tapes. There's something like 700 of them in there. So this is where my life in gaming is at for me. For all this new and retro tech, a lifetime's worth of video games and entertainment, and an incredible wealth of time sinks, you want to know what I really like about it down here? Is that I can just walk away from it, go upstairs, and most of it doesn't follow me. As I approach 46 years old, I find myself appreciating moments or spans of time without any of this stuff more and more. It's been quite a journey though. I've learned so much over the years. And still, I have no clue what the future holds and what might change in the years ahead. The best that I can do is promise that I'll continue to share the stuff that I find interesting and cool with all of you for as long as I'm passionate about it. So, I just want to say thank you. Yes, you, for being part of my life in gaming.